In the Roman history of the world, Britain was just a short chapter in the story of an empire which stretched from Carlisle to Cairo and lasted for hundreds of years. Well, how do we find out what happened here in this island nearly 2,000 years ago? Well, some Roman historians wrote down some of what went on, and standing in the classics section of a well-known bookshop chain, I can see the spines of several dozen books that have come down to us from the ancient world. For years and years, the story of the Romans has been paraded as a set of certainties, hard historical facts, by the ranks of Sir Buffton Tuftons. Well, don't believe a word of it. You're going to find a story that is completely different, but twice as fascinating as anything you half remember from school.
The Romans in Britain. Written and presented by Guy de la Bédoyère. Part 1. Let's look at the evidence. Guy, it's over to you.
Let's follow a path back through history and see what we can find out with any certainty about our past. The first date on British history is 55 BC, when Julius Caesar came with his army to Britain. He was attempting an invasion. It wasn't very successful, and he had to come back the following year, and even that didn't work out very well. He had problems in Gaul, and that was the end of it. The real invasion of Britain didn't come for another 90 years, the year 43, 10 years or so after the death of Christ. That was when the Emperor Claudius's army arrived in Britain, and it all came about because a British king, or a chieftain, called Verica, who was under a threat from a neighbouring tribe in Britain, came over to Rome and said, "Please come and help me." For the Emperor Claudius, this was a wonderful excuse to invade Britain. And by the way, that's the I, Claudius, of the book by Robert Graves and the television series. And we know what happened thanks to the writings of the historian Dio Cassius.
Claudius, a very distinguished senator, commanded a campaign to Britain because a certain Verica, forced out of the island after a rebellion, had persuaded Claudius to send an army there.
Now the trouble is that Dio was writing so long after the events that he was describing had taken place that for all we know, he was making up a very good story out of an odd few facts he'd managed to gather together in the archives in Rome.
They made it to Britain and landed without opposition. The Britons ran away to the marshes and forests.
Now, Dio goes on to tell us a little bit more about Claudius's invasion in greater or lesser detail, but it's mainly recorded to make Claudius, like all Roman emperors, seem all the more impressive. Now, how would we know that that invasion had taken place if that document, that history, had been lost? Well, there's the evidence of Roman coinage. Do you remember that 50p piece with the clasped hands on the reverse? It's supposed to commemorate Britain joining the European Union. Now, it is a good comparison, but of course it only circulated in Britain. In the Roman Empire, coins circulated all the way across Europe and North Africa, and the emperors used them as a perfect way of telling the public about their great achievements.
The Emperor Claudius put a picture of his triumphal arch in Rome onto his coins to celebrate his victory in Britain. It was fine to put up a triumphal arch in Rome, but how many people actually got to see it? Not very many in terms of the empire as a whole. Much more efficient was to put a picture of that on his coins, and many of the people who looked at those coins would have understood exactly the way he was boasting about his conquest of Britain.
So Roman coins can actually tell us rather a lot about what happened. But evidence like that is a bit of a lottery. You never know which bits are going to survive and which bits aren't. Now, the most famous document about the Great Fire of London has to be the diary of Samuel Pepys. And how else would we know it had happened if he hadn't written about it so vividly? Well, we've got the story here in London, written up on a stone inscription at the bottom of the monument. And I'm sure you're ahead of me now. Anyone who was anyone in the Roman world wrote down about themselves what they'd done and their great achievements on stone inscriptions. And if those survive, and many of them do, we can read what happened, and some of them tell us a tremendous amount.
We've got one of the best building inscriptions from the northern frontier, and the clearest and best preserved and most beautifully cut. It records the introduction of a water supply to the fort at South Shields in the year AD 222. And we know that because it's got the name of the governor on, who's called Marius Valerianus. It's also got the name of the emperor, M. Aurelius.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?